Utah and Baylor are going to be right there for the Big 12 football championship in 2025. But here's why the Utes are about to make the same mistake the Bears did at the most important position. Let's get Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, Bears fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on YouTube. Appreciate you guys making it your first listen today and every day. And boy, do we have guests. We are talking with JT Wistersill of Locked On Utah, talking about the Utes and their unexpected odds-on favorites to win the Big 12 this season, but why there's a ton of parallels between that team and this Baylor team from 2024, and which one of them has the advantage in the end. We'll talk about that in a highly anticipated matchup. Plus, I will also be talking to Isaac Shade of Locked On College Basketball to talk about that topsy-turvy game last night with the Arizona Wildcats at Foster Pavilion. It's all that and more coming up on Locked On Baylor. Let's toss it to my conversation with JT Wistersill.
My name is JT Wistersill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On Baylor, Cam Stewart. And Cam, was really excited to have you on for this one because Utah got a new quarterback. We're really excited. Devon Dampier. He is going to be a heck of a player, I think. But the question is, he's making the jump from the group of 5 to the P4. You had a quarterback last year in Dequan Finn, star at Toledo, goes to Baylor. And for those of you Utah fans, I'd be thinking, who's Dequan Finn? That's the quarterback that Utah beat, but that Utah beat Baylor with. And then you guys went on a hot streak and a run after that when you went back to Sawyer Robertson. So I want to know why did Dequan Finn not work out?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone that's making that jump, it's a risk, right? And that's any position, but specifically quarterback. Obviously, we know the importance of that position, especially in today's college football. And yes, you saw in September what it looks like when it's bottoming out with Dequan Finn playing at Utah. So the Dampier thing, it does intrigue me because the way he plays and coming in with the OC. You know, he's not shying away from I'm a dual threat quarterback at best. He's really a running quarterback. You know, he's just, and you look at the numbers here, Dequan Finn was a better passer than Dampier was in the stop before making the jump to the Power 4.
True.
And Finn, I was all on board with. He was a MAC Player of the Year. He was a Group of 5 All-American, which is a good unofficial award. And it looked like a guy who, had done his 4 years. He was ready to kind of make that next step, playing for a really good offensive coordinator. Now, he did battle a bit of an injury, but you saw it in that Utah game. That's what it looks like when it's really bad. And then there are some that are in between, like Diego Pavia, going from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt. I think he's a little overrated, but he was a good player. For Vandy this year. Taylon Green is someone who was somewhere in the middle, going from Boise State to Arkansas, a guy I wanted Baylor to go after. So all I'm saying is it's a risk. Mm-hmm. And I was really into Dequan Finn. I thought, while he didn't run as much as Dampier did, you saw the athleticism on tape the same way you do with Dampier. It pops and you're like, my God, this kid can do anything. It's just a bigger jump than I think even some of the real in-tune college football analysts think. But coming in with a coach is, I'd have to say, a difference.
It is a difference.
And all the ones I listed, right? Yeah.
It helps.
So,
but there are some similarities. I mean, when you look at Dampier stepping up to Dequan Finn. You mentioned Dequan Finn was a better passer. He threw for more yards, 2,657 that last year at Toledo, 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And even he had over 500 yards rushing every year at Toledo, except for one, or over 500 yards all 3 years rushing at Toledo, which is really good for a rushing quarterback. I think the thing that gets me excited about Dampier, and we'll talk about the interception thing in a moment, is just how elusive he is. I mean, 1,000 yards rushing. No player in the country rushed for more yards per carry than Devon Dampier did. Only sacked 4 times. So Am I concerned about the interception thing when you get stingier secondaries, even a little bit better coaching in a lot of cases, right, with Big 12 coaches? So they might try to do things that trick them a little bit more. Yes, but Dampier does have better receiver play this coming year. And at the end of the day, Cam, the one thing that's really going to make him effective is he's going to be able to buy time. And it's just eventually you can only cover for so long. This guy, even though I don't expect him to only get sacked 4 times, but I don't think he'll rush for 1,000 yards, but I expect him to be well over 500 with what a good athlete he is. And I do think that will help him navigate this transition.
That's the thing that makes coaches salivate. Like, is the same thing we saw with Dequan Finn of, man, he can extend plays that quarterback X would not be able to, and can give us something that quarterback X wouldn't give us.
Yep.
But then you have to think, how many plays does he take away? Like, let's use the Dequan Finn, Sawyer Robertson thing here. Like, yeah, Dequan Finn can get out of the pocket. You know, Sawyer's a decent runner, but Dequan can really get out of the pocket, can avoid tackles, all that thing. And it's like, but how many of the passes we need him to make can he not make, and Sawyer Robertson can? And I think that's where this goes hand in hand with Dampier here, because I'm not going to lie to you, JT. A couple weeks ago, when the odds came out and I saw Utah at the top, and
we're going to talk about that in the second segment too. I saw that clip.
Couldn't believe that. I had some segments myself on it. And the first thing I looked at was, okay, I've heard the hype around this kid. I didn't know Devon Dampier, but I had heard the hype, and I looked at the numbers. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. A kid with 12 touchdowns and 12 picks coming from New Mexico is your savior for a 5-win at least improvement to win this conference? I still am a little perplexed by it, JT. I will say, look back to one of the bright spots of Utah's season, that Baylor game, and see where it could be pretty bad. And that's why I think Isaac Wilson is still in the chat. That's
he is still in the chat. I'll say this. I think Devon Dampier, I don't know what level he's going to be at next year. I think he's going to be pretty good. I feel pretty confident saying this transition will go better for him than it went for Dequan Finn. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yes, Dequan Finn played 2 games, and it was pretty bad in that second one specifically. And I think looking back on this, because Dequan was a good passer, but looking back on it, like you and we're not touting ourselves as big time football scouts or anything, but we do our research, we do our homework. And looking back, like a ton of his passing highlights, like he was just kind of throwing off the back foot and zipping it in there. And we should have read those signs as Baylor fans and been like, oh yeah, you can probably get away with that in the MAC. You can't in the Big 12. Like that whole thing gets overblown. Like, I think if you're a damn good player at a lower conference, there's no reason why you can't succeed. Let me look at Cam Scadaboo at a different position, right? There's no reason you can't be a top tier player in a Power 4 conference. But there are sometimes there's writing on the wall and saying, well, probably not getting away with that in the Big 12 against the Big 12 defenses. So yeah, I think Dampier will probably do better because he'll probably have more of a leash. And again, I've said it a couple times now, but coming in with a coach it's just different. So that should, kind of ease things, ease into this thing. And certainly, Utah also has a better supporting cast all across all 3 facets than what Dequan Finn went into last year. He did not have a top 20 nationally ranked defense with a lot of pieces coming back. And we didn't know what we had for weapons. And I think Utah's got a good idea, even though, bringing in a running back and a receiver or 2 in the portal too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too that excites me is he's going to have one of the best tackle duos in the country. So I don't really have to worry about, hey, blindside. Yes, is a guy going to break through once or twice? Sure. But like when they do break through, he's not going to only get sacked 4 times next year. We already said that, but he is not going to get sacked a ton because of how elusive he is too. And that ability to buy time, he won't be able to do what exactly he did, but there were some clips of him also just making Auburn and Arizona defenders look silly. So I do feel like he's ready to make this leap. But we
did that with Dequan. There's Notre Dame. There's Ohio State in that highlight tape. Yeah. I'm just saying, JT, buyer beware, okay?
Great. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I am looking at it with the rose-colored glasses. I do not want last season to get Cam, and I want to believe that we are going to see Dampier be that guy, but there are still those questions there. Speaking of last year, I was pretty high on Utah. Didn't work out so well. You are pretty high on Baylor and not high on Utah. Want to talk about some comments you made about the Utah Utes in the past and debate who will be better in 2025, Utah or Baylor, in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor is brought to you by our great friends at TurboTax. That's right, it's tax season, the time of year that so often can be a hassle, but Intuit TurboTax has your back. Dealing with taxes can be so frustrating. The piles of paperwork and just the frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if we're going to get any money back. Now Taxes is easily uploaded your forms with TurboTax Expert, who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you go about your day. No stress, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app, so guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Once again, that's TurboTax.com/guarantees. Let TurboTax help you make your taxes even easier today. Cam Stewart back here with me, and Cam, talking about the 2025 Big 12 football season. As Vegas does, they put out some early odds. Utah was tied with Kansas State to be the favorite. And we even saw ESPN's Bill Conley predict that Utah was going to win the conference. You were on with Drake Toll, and you had quite the reaction to that ranking. And I will say, I don't think Utah deserves to be the Big 12 favorite right now, based on what they did last year. And even though they brought in some good players on paper, I don't believe they deserve to be the favorite. But why were you so adamant that they do not?
Well, I mean, first off, into the context, and I'll fully admit this, I watched Utah play full games in September, right? I saw them play against Baylor, which looked pretty good. Saw them play against Oklahoma State, looked pretty good. And then they go 5-7.
The good days. September Utah football. This is good.
It's great, man. And then I see 5-7, and I don't care how many of them are one-score games. I know that gets brought up a lot, and I understand why. I understand fundamentally that argument. But then I'm like, why are we buying into this again? Like, Utah was also supposed to win the conference this year, and they went 5-7. So, like, where is this coming from? And this guy who is so valuable in Cam Rising that, you know, when he is there, it's a conference championship team. And when he's not, they're 5-7. He's also not going to be there. So that's why I'm like, I'm freaking out. Like, the fireworks are going on inside my head. And then I look into Utah a little bit more, and I do see how much the team is returning and how, you know, they don't get gashed in the portal. And obviously I did know that one thing of how good that defense was last year. And honestly, it came down to who we talked to in the first segment. I looked at Devon Dampier again, and I said, that is the most important position. Mm-hmm. And that's a major question mark. And I thought back to, so I kind of waxed and waned on this. I was like, oh, maybe Utah is going to be pretty good. But then I said, well, no, I can't buy into this. I can't. And I think back to 2022, Baylor had a great defense the year before, and that was 21 was the great season. They won the Big 12. They won the Sugar Bowl, and they come back basically with a new quarterback. Blake Shapen had played a game and a half, 2.5 games, whatever it was, coming into the 2022 season. They were supposed to win the Big 12. They were picked number 10 in the country, and they went 6-7, JT. I've seen this happen. I've seen it with my own eyes. And so I just don't love where we're taking it. Like, again, what I kind of said in the first segment, if you're picking Utah to win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff, which is also what those odds were for. I mean, I think it was actually winning a national championship. They had the best.
That was actually. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
So then we're talking about, let's just talk about Big 12 championship. That is a 6-win improvement. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. No matter how many one-score games you were in, that's a big jump. Like, we just came off a great year, a fun year for Baylor. That was a 5-win improvement, and it took almost a miracle. It was 6 straight wins to end the season. So that's where I'm still coming from this. I have a higher opinion of Utah than I did a few weeks ago. Well, the team anyway. But State is lovely. Like, I have a higher opinion of the team, but I just still, I'm like, I can't put them more than like 4th or 5th right now. Because when it does come down to quarterback, because I clearly am putting a big emphasis on that, I like Baylor's quarterback better. I like Arizona State's quarterback better. I like Kansas State's quarterback better. And I think some people were a little disappointed in his season last year. So I like Kansas's quarterback better.
Yeah.
I don't know what we're going to get from Dampier. So to me, it might be harsh honing in on just one position when there is a defense that good, but I still can't buy the Utah Big 12 champion stock. I can't do it, JT.
You make a number of great points.
Thank
and if
you.
you'd said every single one of them about Arizona State, you would have been absolutely wrong last year. That's what
true. I mean,
that's what I'm looking at for this Utah team about why, hey, look, obviously I'm going to be looking at them in the most positive lens I can because I'm the Utah guy. Like that's what this is too. But there's a lot of reason to think this Utah team can be the team that bounces back. And I'm going to say this, Baylor deserves to be ranked higher right now. But Cam, I believe Utah will finish higher than Baylor next year. I think this Utah defense is I think this Utah defense is loaded up with talent again. I think the offensive line is good. And I really think Dampier is going to be a really good player for this Utah team. It's not Devon Dampier taking this team to 10 wins by himself. It's the fact you go from bad quarterback play to what I do believe will be good quarterback play next year. Now, a different type of good quarterback play, but I'm really high on this Utah team. I've talked about them a little bit. Let's talk about Baylor. I still have some questions, actually, and I
do too. To be fair, yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I and we talked about some of my questions with Utah too. So, but Baylor, my thing I'm still worried about with Baylor is yes, you guys closed the year really well. You still didn't beat a ranked team last year. So that's a big concern as well. And look, I like Sawyer. I think he's a good player, but I look at some of the best defenses he played. BYU, Houston. That's 5 combined interceptions in those games. You can't turn it over if you're going to play the best team. And I also still have
BYU. He kept him in that game, though. He kept him in that game against BYU. They put him in a hell of a hole, and Houston was terrible. Yeah, it was his worst game of the season. Yeah.
Well, and Utah QBs look bad against Houston. Well, to be fair, Utah QBs look bad in a lot of games overall. But look, I'm looking at it from this standpoint too. You guys were also ready to run Dave Aranda out of town. I do have some questions about the culture and everything that's in place there. Can we really go from hot seat to all of a sudden Big 12 championship contender this year? There was some bad mojo around that Baylor football team at the start of the year. Do you really think that last year, I know you beat Kansas, but are they really going to be able to carry it all the way through? I have major questions about that. I've seen Utah still do that with the current culture they have in place.
Yeah, I would say, this is a different example, but there were some people throwing fire under the seat of Ryan Day a few months ago, and look where he is now. Look where he is now. No, but that's a tougher example because Ohio State's such a good program. But even like Marcus Freeman on the other side, like that was a guy who was not proven, had not proven anything until the back end of this season. And it turns out, maybe he can coach a little bit, got them right to the national championship game. And it's funny that it would then be 2 years removed. This year will then be 2 years removed from like the real, how did we hold on to Dave Aranda? Why didn't we fire him? And really 12 months after some people were still clamoring for it. And we still didn't know if he was going to be fired. Looking back on his best season at Baylor, 2021, one of 2 good seasons that he's had at Baylor, that was, a year removed from nobody even knew who this guy was. And you were coming off a 2-7 team. People after that season were like, you should have done everything to keep Matt Rule in here. Like, what a mistake. What a dropping of the ball that was. And then they went on to go and win the Big 12. This is a loaded question, or I guess I'm going to give a loaded answer, I think is a better way to put it, because I don't think the culture, the way we see it, was necessarily the problem at Baylor. It was just I didn't know if the guy knew how to win, which is also important.
He's won a Big 12 championship game.
I know. But then it becomes the point of like, is it just Matt Rule's guys? And it was all Matt Rule's guys. I thought Dave Aranda was the perfect guy to lead them. We went from a guy in Matt Rule who had never beaten a ranked team in 5 years to Dave doing it against 5 ranked teams in the same season and having the best finish in Baylor history. But it was just, it was like, do we have the right defensive coordinator, but he's actually a head coach? It was that kind of thing. He was still developing great relationships. He was recruiting well enough in terms of like getting in the final 3 of some really top guys, but they weren't winning football games. Those guys weren't committing there. So now once they start winning games, they pulled in a good class this year. It's like, maybe this is the right culture. So it's a long way of saying, JT, we're still trying to figure out if it's the right culture. Okay.
Sure.
Not all of us get coaches that for 20 years. Okay? We're still trying to figure out if this is the right deal. He's said the right things for the most part. His players say the right things. His assistants say and do the right things. And this year it turned into wins. And so now I look at a team that brings back most of their offensive line, brings back their quarterback, number one receiver, top two running backs, and basically their quarterback on defense at the Mike linebacker position. There are still question marks here for sure, but I look at those positions and say, to bring those back, there's a lot of teams with even a ton of talent out there that would kill to bring that kind of continuity back to their season this year.
I will say I like this Baylor team. I think they're going to be good, and I do think they deserve to be ranked inside the top 5 of preseason polls for the conferences. But also say this: can Baylor be better than Utah if they can't actually beat them 0-2 last couple years, Cam?
Oh! You didn't have the Sawyer Robertson experience. I'm just throwing that out there.
Who was the quarterback the 2 years ago, the game we played?
That was a different Sawyer Robertson. I did forget about that. That was Sawyer's first start ever. That was a way different Sawyer Robertson. Damn it. Yes, you did get the Sawyer Robertson experience, but we back up now. Okay.
Yes, and obviously quarterbacks make a huge from their first start all the way along to that. It is a long way, but I was thinking about it. I was like, I think he did come in that game.
Yeah, he did play that whole game actually. Yeah.
Hey, if there's one thing we can agree on, it's how insane Ohio State fans are. I understand they're frustrated about losing to Michigan, but you have a coach who consistently gets you the college football playoff, and you're like, fire him. We're sitting here like, just get us once to the playoff, and we'll build a statue.
Please, God, yes. We'll name the stadium after you, dude.
Exactly.
It's great to be joined today on Locked On College Basketball by our guy Cam Stewart, the host of Locked on Baylor. I wish it was under better terms, Cam, but we are recording literally minutes after things finished off there in Waco, Texas, with Arizona winning 74-67. Cam, I mean, it's tough. Baylor has been ravaged by injuries this season. Josh Ajanua, just now done for the season. Baylor essentially goes 4 guards around Norchad Omier. We did have, you and I were talking beforehand, and I think this is the starting point. If you had told us during the Final Four in 2022 that 2 of the starting guards would 3 years later be playing against each other in mid-February in a Big 12 game of Arizona, which is now in the Big 12 at Baylor, meaning Caleb Love and Jeremy Roach, I don't know what we would have thought about it, but here we are. Welcome to college basketball in 2025, Cam Stewart.
Well, you probably would have thought that Caleb Love would come away victorious, which is what has been accomplished here for the second time this season. It is a crazy, wild world that we live in, and it is funny to think of what Jeremy Roach has probably lacked this year for Baylor, albeit dealing with a couple injuries throughout this season. But seeing what a bright young star he was for that Duke team in 2022, yeah, you saw the small ball lineup get exposed for Baylor last night. Like it's something that they kind of skirted by, and they will skirt by in other games. But Arizona being the best rebounding team in the Big 12, Visar had a big game against them last time, and
first career start for him.
And gets the first career start and gets the ESPN Player of the Game in this one. Nothing like earth-shattering, but a pretty solid night from him again. And you just saw it. I mean, especially in the last couple minutes, Arizona only out-rebounds them by 6, which I say only because it felt like it was 12 or 15 at points in that game, especially towards the end of that game, Isaac. Like, how many times was it like, oh, just pull that down? And Arizona, even if they weren't scoring, getting 2 or 3 looks at the basket in the final 4, probably under the last media timeout, and that just it takes opportunities and precious seconds away from Baylor and that comeback bid.
Yeah, and all told, it's funny as you were talking about that. I felt the same, like to the eye test, but I just looked at the numbers. Literally, the offensive rebounds were tied and second chance points were tied in this game, but it definitely didn't feel like that. I thought Arizona had a bunch late. Can we mention the injury to Josh? You mentioned the injury to Jeremy Roach, and that has been, man, I just have to feel so bad for Scott Drew and the staff. It's been a storyline of this season, player after player injured, whether it's Langston Love, I mean, all sorts of guys. Mm-hmm. And like at some point, how do you not just feel defeated by that onslaught?
I think there is some of that. I think there just naturally is some of that, right? I've been critical of Baylor this year. I think they've been underachieving outside of the injuries, but it's tough also when you're not having a couple of your big time rotational guys. I don't think they attacked the big man position as well as they should have in the portal. They got quality in Norchad Omier, who's one of the best guys out there, but they didn't get any kind of depth. And, in mid-February when Josh O goes out for the season, there you have it. You don't have anyone behind him at that position who has any kind of college basketball experience. You're talking about Marino Dubrovcic, a guy they added to the roster in July from Croatia. Like that, those guys don't necessarily play big minutes in the Big 12 in year one. So
he's still out there somewhere. Can we get him back?
Is who?
JTT, is he still?
Oh, dude, I gotta check his availability. I gotta check his eligibility. I mean, he could do a shift for this team. I really do. I think. By the way,
for those uninitiated, I don't mean Home Improvement's Jonathan Taylor Thomas. I mean Jonathan.
That's where you had me. You had me for a second on the JTT. That's what it was. Clearly, Isaac. I mean, I was definitely alive when that show was on television. Actually, I might have for like a year. And I do want to say about this Baylor team in that game last night against Arizona. The fight was there, and it's not always there. And I know that's a loser mentality, but they really fought like hell in that game, and the crowd was into it for a late tip off. And they made it interesting. They got it to 4 late in that game, but this is the independent of injuries criticism I have of Baylor. They didn't have. They have guys passing up open shots. They don't have guys who make those kill shots. They're not a 3-point shooting team, which is something that they could have taken advantage of in this game against Arizona. But they just don't have it. And it starts and ends with VJ Edgecombe.
Yeah. You mentioned Vesar, who finishes the game 13 points. Toby Awaka had a double-double for Arizona, 14 and 12. But as you just said, VJ Edgecombe was the leading scorer in this game, 24 points, 6 of 13 from the field, 11 of 14 from the free throw line, Cam, which juxtaposed, as I'm looking at the box score, literally right above him, Rob Wright with an 0 for tonight. That's just, I mean, he's been so good in so many ways this year for Baylor, but just a tough night for the freshman in this one. But for this other freshman, VJ Edgecombe, Franchilla talked about it a lot on the broadcast for those who watched it last night, was just saying, VJ Edgecombe doesn't seem to really realize quite yet how good he is. Baylor feels pretty safe to me right now in the 8-9 range for the tournament. And thankfully the schedule gets a bit easier here in the final 5 games before Houston to wrap the regular season. Does VJ just need to basically take over this team? Is that what needs to happen, or is there something else that's a trick up the sleeve?
No, I think you had it. I think Fran had it too. I thought it was a great point when I heard it on the broadcast. That's who it needs to go through now. And we've kind of known that watching Baylor the last couple of weeks. Yep. But I think we're understanding now the extent of how much it needs to go through him. Like this is almost like an Allen Iverson 76ers deal of like, hey, just get the ball and do something with it. And I thought he probably realized it probably a bit too late in this game last night, where there are just teams, I mean, most situations that Baylor's in where they can't guard him. Yeah. And he gets downhill and ahead of steam. You saw it that last play before the half where he takes it. He's got, 12 inches of daylight and dunks on somebody. Like that's what it needs to be. And that I think will open things up for other guys, be it Norchad Omier or maybe, Langston Love getting open shots coming off the bench, but it's him. Like I think someone needs to pull him aside. I think they did earlier in the season say, hey, you need to be more aggressive. I think the conversation needs to be had of like, VJ, you're kind of all we got right now. Norchad's playing 40 minutes a game. That's too much for him. You're kind of what we have right now. When you go downhill and you do those things, they can't guard you. Most teams in the league, as good as this league is, can't guard you. That's why you're going to be picked in the top 5 in a couple months here. Yeah. And wherever Baylor goes in this season, it's going to be because VJ Edgecombe's taking them there. And he's improved in a couple of things in his game. He's an improved 3-point shooter, although you didn't see it in that game against Arizona. But yeah, absolutely, Isaac. Like this is wherever they go, it's going to be via VJ Edgecombe and him taking over games.
I would like him to take me over to the Bahamas. I think that would be fun.
Nice.
And I would go home with him. Yes.
I'll show you the places.
Baylor has now flip-flopped their last 8 games. Loss, win, loss, or, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. The game coming up.
Certainly felt like it. Yeah.
Right. Like, man, that is a real thing. Now, Bears sit at 8-7 in Big 12 play, but as we said, a very manageable schedule coming up at Colorado, at Cincinnati, hosting Oklahoma State, and then at TCU before hosting Houston to end the regular season. I feel like 4-1 is a very respectable run down the stretch there, Cam. And if so, Baylor finishes 12-8 in Big 12 play. Mm-hmm. As for Arizona, when you look at they actually have a more difficult stretch. Of course, they've got a better Big 12 record right now at 12-3, but they've got to host BYU, host Utah, and like the state of Utah just basically wrecked K-State's bubble hopes on Monday night,
man.
Or over the weekend and Monday night, I should say. But then at Iowa State, hosting Arizona State, and then at Kansas. So Arizona's got some work to do down the stretch. Really curious to see what happens there and at the top of the Big 12. And Cam, that's what I want to ask about. Obviously, Baylor, I think the hope is, can we get up to like 4th, 5th, 6th in the conference by the time it's all said and done? Probably not 4th, because Iowa State's sitting there with 4 losses. But I mean, 5th seems reasonable given how Kansas is playing. And then Houston and Arizona kind of solidifies their spot just under the Cougars right there. You think Arizona has some hope of overtaking Houston, or you think that kind of sits 1-2?
I think that probably is 1-2, but I wouldn't want that to distract from the fact that Arizona is very good and has really overcome, 4-5 to start the season? Yes. Like I had already written them off. I was like, they don't deserve to be in this league, even though they hadn't played a league game yet. But they are absolutely, like Scott Drew has talked about it. There's 3 or 4 teams from this conference that can go to the Final Four. Arizona's one of them. Okay, Houston's one of them. Iowa State's one of them, and Tech is as well.
Tech, I would say all 4 of those are capable, in my opinion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Arizona, that classic story of losing a star player to injury and making other guys better, and that's what Tommy Lloyd's done with this team. And it's a gauntlet down the rest of the way to even to just have at Hilton and at Fog Allen on your schedule. Baylor needs to get to 19 wins overall. That's what's going to get them there. And I think if at 4-1, that would make them. Would that put them at 20? I believe. I think they've got 16
right now. They have 18, so they just need one more.
18. There you go. Yeah, 19, 20. They're in. Lenardi has them at like a 97% chance. I don't know how much they move up though. I don't know how much. Even at a 4-1 finish, I don't know. I mean, you're off the 8-9 probably, but you're not getting into a 5 or maybe even a 6.
And we'll find out today on Tuesday, because Lunardi always puts out his new brackets on Tuesday. So we will see his update as of today. And I said Houston, Arizona 1-2. Texas Tech is tied with Arizona in Big 12 standings right now. And Iowa State, I still think might be the best team in the conference now that they have Momcilovic back, right? So, dude, it's that top 4, man. It's crazy to see. Cam, thank you so much, folks. Please make sure you go check out all of Cam's great work at Locked On Baylor. We'll see what's going on with these guys. Hopefully, VJ Edgecombe can take it and run. Let Roach be a facilitator. Let Omier do his stuff inside, and a couple other guys around, and we can see what happens with Langston Love and the rest. Cam, thank you so much, brother.
Isaac, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. Special thank you to Isaac, special thank you to JT as well, and special thank you to you guys for tuning in, making it to the end, making it your first listen today and every day. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about anything, but more to the point about that game last night and about this Baylor-Utah kind of mini rivalry we got going in football, and what advice you would give after seeing the Dequan Finn experiment fail at Baylor to the Devon Dampier stands over at Utah. Let me know down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot. We're coming to you 5 days a week with nothing but Baylor content and not at all tied to Baylor University. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you for making this such a great community. And we will see you tomorrow on Locked On Baylor.